감사합니다. 안녕하십니까. 이번 세션의 좌장을 맡은 안은주 부대변인입니다. 2022년 12월 한국은 자유, 평화, 번영의 인도태평양 전략을 발표하였습니다. 인태 지역에서 한반도 핵 문제 등 전통적인 안보 위협부터 사이버 위협, 글로벌 공급망 불안 등 신흥 안보 도전까지 글로벌 현안에 대한 한국의 역할과 외교 정책에 대한 관심도가 높아지고 있는 상황입니다. 한국의 인태 전략 이행에 대해 외신 기자님들의 견해를 청취하고 이에 대해 논의해보고자 이번 세션을 마련하게 되었습니다. 이번 세션에서는 우선 제가 발표를 한 후 토론자분들의 발언을 듣고 나서 자유 토론을 하는 방식으로 진행하도록 하겠습니다. 먼저 세션에 참석해 주신 토론자분들을 소개해 드리겠습니다. 첫 번째 토론자는 FA 스페인 뉴스 에이전시의 안드레스 산체스 브라운 님이십니다. 안드레스 산체스 브라운은 스페인어권에서 가장 영향력 있는 일간지인 엘 파이스 신문 마드리드 본사에서 5년간 기자 및 편집자로 일하였고 일본 특파원을 거쳐 2017년부터 한국 특파원으로 근무하고 있습니다. 김정은과 트럼프 대통령의 회담 그리고 3번의 남북 정상회담을 하는 등 취재를 통해 한국의 대외 정책에 큰 관심을 보여주고 있습니다. 두 번째 토론자는 마이니치 신문사 서울지국장 사카구치 님이십니다. 1998년 마이니치 신문에 입사하여 정치부 근무 이후 비엔나 특파원, 정치부 부부장, 외신부 부부장을 거쳐 2021년 4월부터 마이니치 신문 서울지국장으로 근무하고 있습니다. 외신 기자로서의 경험을 살려 2016년에 르뽀 난민 추적 발칸 루트를 가다를 출간한 바 있습니다. 마지막으로 세 번째 토론자는 TRT 월드의 프랭크 스미스 기자님이십니다. 한국에서 15년간 활동하고 있는 프리랜서 기자로서 도이치웰레, ABC 뉴스, AFP 등을 거쳐 현재 TRT 월드에 근무하고 있습니다. 한국 방송의 TVN의 매개통신 프로그램의 외신 어벤져스로 출연하는 등 한국 프로그램에도 활발히 출연하셨으며 한국 이슈에 대한 관점을 국제사회에 제공하는 데 큰 관심을 가지고 계십니다. 그럼 이제 본 세션을 시작하겠습니다. 우선 제가 한국의 인도태평양 전략에 대해 발표를 시작하겠습니다. Ladies and gentlemen, let me go over Korea's strategy for a free, peaceful, and prosperous Indo-Pacific region, which was announced in December last year. This strategy envisions a multi-layered and comprehensive network of partnerships to counter challenges facing the region and let me go over the PPT that I have prepared. First, let's look at what is Indo-Pacific strategy. Korea has put forward the vision of Global Pivotal State Initiative when the Yoon Suk-yeol president started his term last year in May. And this initiative aims at Korea being a pace setter in cutting-edge industries, and as world's 10th largest economy, Korea wants to play its role and take on responsibilities, thereby to contribute to the world for its peace and prosperity. And Korea can play a role, an important role, because it is a dynamic and leading democratic country which has overcome its past as a war-ravaged country after the Korean War and emerged as world's 10th largest economy. And this Indo-Pacific strategy has a vision and it has principles of cooperation. Let me go over them briefly. Korea's Indo-Pacific strategy's vision is achieving a free, peaceful, and prosperous Indo-Pacific. Free means reinforcing rules-based international order built on universal values. Universal values means that Korea will have solidarity with nations sharing these values. And these universal values comprise freedom, democracy, rule of law, and human rights. And this solidarity means that Korea joins the opposition to unilateral change to the status quo, thereby promoting a harmonious regional order. And this requests that countries respect mutual interests while seeking common goals. And second element of this vision is peaceful. A free, peaceful, and prosperous Indo-Pacific will demand that Korea plays an active role in preventing disputes and resolving armed conflicts. And also this effort should be based on rules, and this should be achieved through peaceful dialogue. And to bolster comprehensive partnerships to solve various issues facing the region and the Korean Peninsula, such as North Korea's nuclear issue, non-proliferation, counterterrorism, maritime security, cybersecurity, and health security. And these will require that Korea's global pivotal state initiative will be founded upon and guided by our shared values and on the international order that was established at the end of the Second War. And lastly, the third element, prosperous, what this means is this free, peaceful, and prosperous Indo-Pacific will be achieved through an open and fair economic order, and Korea will join countries in building a stable environment for individuals, businesses, nations engaging in economic activities. And we will endeavor to enhance supply chain resilience, expanding networks for economic security, fostering cooperative and inclusive economic and technological ecosystem. And Korea will also contribute to tackling new challenges, such as climate change, digital divide, and global health issues. How to do that? By collaborating with other ODA donor countries. Now let me reiterate the principles of cooperation regarding this Indo-Pacific strategy. There are three principles of this cooperation. One, inclusiveness. That means Korea's strategy neither targets nor excludes any particular country. Korea seeks cooperation with all partners that are aligned with Korea's vision and cooperation principles. Second element is trust. We will work with reliable partners based on strong mutual interest, which is an integral element of tackling the various regional and global challenges. And lastly, reciprocity. We will work based on mutually beneficial cooperation, and we will seek to share our own successful development and democratization experience and jointly promote technological advancement and cultural exchange. And there are 9 priority areas. If you're interested, leaflet on Indo-Pacific strategy of Korea will be distributed at the end of this session. And what is significant in Korea's diplomatic history is that this strategy aims at reaching beyond Korean Peninsula, and it means we aspire to broaden our diplomatic outreach, and we will set our strategic horizons beyond the Korean Peninsula. And this is the first time ever that Korea expressly incorporated the promotion and protection of universal values as a critical element of its foreign policy strategy. And Korea, in order to realize this vision and this strategy, stands ready to help meet the aspirations of many nations to achieve national development and economic growth. And I would like to conclude by mentioning the wide geographic scope of the Indo-Pacific strategy of Korea. Korea envisions an Indo-Pacific region that comprises North Pacific, Southeast Asia, and ASEAN countries, South Asia, Oceania, African coast of the Indian Ocean, Europe, and Latin America. And this means that Korea is ready to broaden its perspective beyond the horizon in the past and will enhance its role befitting its stature as the world's 10th largest economy. Again, let me emphasize that Korea will take on more roles and responsibilities in order to meet the expectations of the global community and in order to play a role befitting its enhanced stature. So this is my little presentation, and now I would like to ask the speakers to make their remarks that they have prepared. First, I would like to ask Mr. Brown to make his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. An, and like to thank the Ministry of Foreign Affairs also for inviting us. It's always a pleasure to visit Jeju and this forum, and to be part of a panel with my colleagues too. With no further ado, regarding the strategy, the Indo-Pacific strategy, I'd like to point out first that the minister, actually Mr. Park Jin, referred to it as a de facto foreign policy doctrine. So I'd like to think of it as probably policy-wise the boldest shift in when it comes to foreign relations diplomacy for Korea in a very long time. The strategy is indeed a blueprint of sorts in order to increase Korea's leadership both on a regional and a global level. But what is new or most important about the Indo-Pacific strategy? Well, in my opinion, as you mentioned already, I think first of all, it actually establishes clarity as opposed to ambiguity, and it does this by drawing a line, by voicing a compromise for the first time when it comes to defending rules-based international order, democracy, human rights, etc. And it places weight on relationships and countries that share and defend these values, right? Now, how does this policy shift affect Korea's relations or master plans with countries within the region or outside of it? For example, there's a very unequivocal side to the strategy. For example, when it comes to North Korea, there's no big shift, of course, when Seoul underlines the fact that Pyongyang's weapons of mass destruction program is a threat to peace and stability, not only in the peninsula, but on a global level. It's pretty unequivocal, in my opinion, when it comes to ASEAN, and let's remember that President Yoon Suk-yeol actually chose to publish or showcase the strategy at an ASEAN summit in Phnom Penh in Cambodia. I think the strategy lays ground for an important increase in both in diplomatic and economic ties, including, for example, ODA or investment. Then, for example, the strategy does pretty much align with the US's own Indo-Pacific strategy. Actually, both strategies share the same name. The strategy also lays a foundation for an important improvement of ties with Japan. And lastly, but most importantly, I think it poses a bit of a dilemma when it comes to China, and I'd like to focus on this. For example, by analyzing a little bit how China is mentioned in the document, actually China is basically implied all along the document. Every time Seoul, voices its or defends the fact that it will not allow or support a unilateral change of status quo by force in the region, or every time it underlines the importance of free navigation or overflight on the South China Sea, or when it underlines the importance of peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait, or it defends the importance of rule of law, democracy, etc. China is always implied in that sense because those are values that, as we know, are not a priority to the Chinese government in many aspects. But how is China actually referenced directly in the document? It's only referenced twice, and I think that is quite telling of what kind of a shift we have here, given that it's a regional policy document. And we're only mentioning China twice, China being the largest power in the region. But one of the mentions, which I think is the most important reference in this case, is that Korea calls China a key partner in achieving peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region. And then it goes verbatim, I wrote it down, sorry. It goes on to say that it is a key partner with whom we will nurture a sounder and more mature relationship as we pursue shared interests based on mutual respect and reciprocity, guided by international norms and rules. Now, there's two important elements here, I think. The fact that Korea chooses to call China an important key ally definitely falls short from what other countries have done, like the US or Canada. The US has called China its biggest challenge. Canada has called China an increasingly disruptive global power. So we definitely have a very different thing here. Seoul definitely wants to have and maintain a strong, solid relationship with China. But on the other hand, it does mention that it wants a more mature relationship based on mutual respect, reciprocity, and guided by international norms and rules. These things are a series of elements where Seoul appears to want a bit of a turnaround in its new relationship with China, right? And of course, Korea and China's relationship is a very long and complex one. It goes back centuries, but for the past century, we've had episodes like the Korean War, then 5 or so decades of a lack of diplomatic relations, and then comes 1992, and enthusiasm was burning strong on both sides up until the midway through the Park Geun-hye administration, and then an episode happened that I think we probably all agree was a bit of a turnaround, which was the deployment of the THAAD missile defense system in the Korean territory. The economic coercion that Beijing implemented in response to the THAAD deployment, I think not only affected the way that Korean officials or business people think about China, it also affected the Korean public opinion because of how disruptive it was for economic activity, or how it affected the livelihoods of people. And for example, the island of Jeju is a clear example of that disruption, I think. And then after THAAD, we have, the Chinese-U.S. rivalry starting to pick up, and suddenly in 4 years' time, the center of everything is this rivalry, right? And then another episode happens that I think was another turning point, which was the pandemic, and how China did respond to certain things in the pandemic. And for example, the last clear example would be when Korea decided to enforce mandatory PCR testing for incoming travelers from China, just right after Beijing had abruptly decided to put an end to its COVID-0 policy. And I think it was a very reasonable measure to be taken, because especially during the first weeks, we had 1 out of 4 passengers coming from China that actually did test positive for COVID. So the response from Beijing was actually to stop issuing short-term visas for Koreans. Quite a bold response. So this discomfort that we were seeing that was going on behind doors suddenly is out in the open with China's response in this sense. Can things get worse right now? I mean, after the presentation of the Indo-Pacific strategy, Beijing voiced a bit of Beijing wasn't happy about the strategy, but it wasn't too bold at it. But then we've seen that things have taken a turn for the worse when Beijing, for example, retorts at President Yoon Suk-yeol commenting on Taiwan's situation, or the summit Yoon had with U.S. President Joe Biden. But basically, and I think the important thing here would be to think in the mid to long term, not on the short term. And I think Seoul is right now in a situation where the Indo-Pacific strategy is not designed definitely to decouple from China at all. It's just a strategy to diversify its ties diplomatically and economically to the region. Whereas on the other hand, Beijing is going through situations that are similar. There's countries it has relations with. Those relations are souring somehow. There's the Ukraine war. I personally don't think that Beijing wants to keep juggling like that for a long time. So ultimately, I think it's going to depend, on the one hand, on how Seoul implements its strategy, how Seoul stands its ground when it comes to defend the principles that you mentioned, without excessively angering China. But most importantly, I think Beijing's actions are going to be the most decisive factor in this sense. And we already know that public opinion in Korea is not very favorable to China. So yes, I think that's probably going to be the most important factor right now. Thanks.
Thank you for your frank appraisal of the situation surrounding the Korean Peninsula. Let me just add that Korea has interacted with our neighbor China for over 5,000 years, which is a very long time, and while having influenced each other, so we have influenced each other greatly over those 5,000 years, and China is currently our biggest trading partner and a key partner in the Korean Peninsula issue, especially when it comes to resolving North Korean nuclear issue. China is an indispensable partner. So I would like to emphasize that. Now let's turn to our next speaker, and he will make his remarks in Korean, because he has arrived in Korea and he has learned Korean, and I would like for him to showcase his Korean language skills now. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And I'm Hirohiko Sakaguchi of Japan's Mainichi newspaper, Seoul Bureau Chief. And 2 years passed actually since I came to ROK, and I actually made today's script in Korean languages, and I will brief you on in Korean language today. Okay. 인태 전략에서는 한국 정부가 앞으로 미국, 일본, 호주와 같은 가치관을 공유하는 국가들과 우선적으로 협력해 나가겠다는 결의를 분명히 하고 있습니다. 솔직히 처음부터 일찍 발표됐으면 더 좋았을 텐데, 그동안 한국 외교가 전개해온 가능성이 인태 전략을 특급분에 파괴되었다는 인상 느낌을 받았습니다. 우크라이나를 침공한 러시아, 대만의 무력 사용 가능성도 시사하는 중국, 핵미사일 개발을 가속하는 북한, 역시 세계에서 지금 일어나고 있는 것을 생각하면 자유나 민주주의란 똑같은 가치관을 공유하는 나라들이 함께 대응한다는 것은 당연입니다. 그런 점에서도 당연히 이 전략은 평가할 수 있습니다. 윤 대통령님께서는 자유, 민주주의를 중요시하며 이러한 가치관을 공유하는 파트너 국가들과 협력해 나갈 방침을 분명히 밝혔습니다. 그런데요, 저는 윤 대통령님 가장 좋은 점은 발신하는 메시지가 항상 명확하고 이해하기 쉽고 행동으로 보여준다는 것입니다. 기자로서 기사를 만들 때 쓰기가 쉬운 대통령입니다. 다음에 관련하여 한일 관계에 대해서 이야기하겠습니다. 특히 전략에서는 일본은 가장 가까운 나라로서 협력해 나가는 중요성이 강조되고 있습니다. 일본 입장에서 보면 앞으로 한미일 3국이 안보, 경제 분야에서 얼마나 협력을 심화시킬 수 있으냐가 그 길로 이어집니다. 솔직히 저는 한국에 온 지 2년 지냈는데 처음 왔을 때는 한일 관계가 1965년 국교 정상화 이후 최악 수준이라고까지 할 정도로 떨어져 있었습니다. 그래서 안타깝다, 아깝다는 마음을 계속 갖고 있었습니다. 한국 분이랑 개인적으로 이야기했을 때는 이렇게 사이좋게 이야기할 수 있는데 왜 처음부터 전부 됐을 때는 잘 안 되냐 이런 식으로 느꼈습니다. 그러니까 인대 전략을 처음에 읽었을 때는 한일 관계가 드디어 정상화 쪽으로 가고 있다고 실감했던 기억이 남아 있습니다. 그러나 작년 말 시점에서 설마 한일 관계가 지금 수준까지 정상화 될 것이라고 상상하지 못했습니다. 3월에 한국 정부가 간지징용 문제에 대한 해결 방안 발표하시고 그리고 도쿄에서 한일 정상회담이 되었으며 그리고 5월에는 우리 기시다 후미오 총리가 한국에 오셔서 서울에서 한일 정상회담이 개최되었고 히로시마에서 열린 G7 사미트에서도 세 번째 한일 정상회담이 개최되었습니다. 사실 저는 가장 빠른 타이밍의 여름에 기시다 총리가 방한할 수 있으며 좋겠다는 생각을 갖고 있었습니다. 아까 말씀을 하셨는데 말씀을 드렸는데 한미일 협력이 가장 중요하다고 말씀드렸습니다. 일본과 한국은 서로가 미국 동맹 국가로서 도움을 주고 바로 이 지역에서 코너스톤 역할을 해야 합니다. 그런 의미에서 남아있는 문제를 제대로 해결하고 한일 관계 정상화가 더욱 가속화될 것이라고 기대하고 있습니다. 실제로 윤 대통령님께서는 지난달 29일에 태평양 토속국가 정상회의를 개최하셨습니다. 큰 진전라고 빅 스텝라고 느꼈습니다. 물론 기자 입장에서 보면 모르는 점도 남아 있습니다. 한국 정부가 지금 생각하시는 인도 태평양이라는 것은 어디서부터 어디까지인지 좀 더 명확하게 되었으면 좋겠다고 그렇게 생각합니다. 이렇게 말씀을 드린 이유는 한국뿐만 아니라 일본에서도 인도 태평양이라는 단어는 애매한 개념 혹은 단어로서 사용하는 느낌을 갖고 있으니까요. 또 정치적인 메시지도 중요합니다만 앞으로 어떤 구체적인 행동으로 보여줄지도 매우 중요합니다. 인도 태평양이라는 개념으로 한미일 그리고 한일 구체적으로 협력해 나가를 것인가입니다. 당연한 것처럼 소통하고 당연한 것처럼 협력하고 일하는 게 가장 좋은 결과가 나오는 것 같습니다. 인도 태평양 지리적으로 봐도 매우 크기 때문에 어떤 역할을 부담하면서 한일 양국을 하겠는지 이것도 중요한 포인트라고 생각합니다. 또 하나는 한국은 역사적으로나 지리적으로나 가까운 중국과 거리감을 어떻게 유지하시는지도 서울 특파원으로 중요한 포인트라고 생각합니다. 듣고 주셔서 감사합니다.
네, 사카구치 히로이코님의 의견 잘 들었습니다. 감사합니다. 한 가지 제가 덧붙이자면 우리 한국의 인태 전략은 굉장히 포괄적인 지역 전략입니다. 그런데 이 지리적인 개념이 대륙의 개념보다는 해양의 개념으로 보기 때문에 이 해양에 접한 대륙의 수가 증가됩니다. 자연스럽게. 그래서 과거의 한국의 외교 무대를 한반도와 동북아 지역으로 한정을 했지만 한국은 향후 전략적인 활동 공간을 넓히고 국제사회에 더욱 많은 기여를 하겠다는 그런 확고한 의지를 표명한 것입니다. 예. 그리고 말씀하신 것처럼 한일 관계가 좋아짐으로써 앞으로 북핵 등 관련한 그런 안보 협력, 그다음에 공급망 협력 등 경제안보 협력, 그다음에 인적 교류, 글로벌 이슈 협력 등을 더욱더 제고해 나감으로써 한일 관계가 개선됨으로써 양국 국민이 실질적으로 혜택을 받는 부분이 많아졌다는 부분을 실감하실 수 있도록 하는 것이 정부의 역할이라고 생각합니다. 네. 다음으로는 프랭크 스미스님의 의견을 들어보겠습니다.
Okay, first I'd like to thank the Foreign Ministry for having me and joining this panel with colleagues in the Foreign Correspondent pool. I'd like to start by saying that while I report for various different international media, my remarks are going to express my own personal opinion and not theirs. And I'll focus more on comments that have been gleaned from my work as an adjunct lecturer at Yonsei University GSIS, where I teach a course in international news analysis and political communications. So specifically in terms of the Indo-Pacific strategy, I'll be talking about the political communication of South Korea and the Indo-Pacific strategy. And I will have both a critical and complementary perspective of that. So first we have to answer the question, what's political communication? So we're talking about actors trying to influence the public, politicians, governments, NGOs, and companies. They want to influence the public, and they do that through the media, text, radio, photo, and video, to reach those that they want to persuade the public. Now, as a TV person, I'm like a lit major and a poet as a youth. So I do love words, but I think we need to recognize that emotion empowers political communication. It's emotion that's the most powerful of those medium. While text, radio, and photo are influential, video, television, video, be it Facebook Live or YouTube or Instagram or TikTok, it's video that moves people, moves the public. So I want to provide an example here of good political communication.
Вшановуємо кожного, хто захищав планету від нацизму у роки Другої світової війни. Мільйони втрачених життів, скалічених доль, закатованих душ і мільйони причин, щоб сказати злу ніколи знову.
Okay, when it comes to Volodymyr Zelensky, he's not speaking English. We don't need the CGs, the subtitles. We know from text, and he's been in the media so much, we know what he's talking about. But it's this image of a leader, a president, in kind of a military t-shirt with one word, usually, could be one word, Ukrainian, on his t-shirt. That's what moves us. If we just read about him in the New York Times or other very influential text media, it wouldn't have the same effect as television. Now, to be a little bit critical, let's look at political communication in mass media and compare South Korea with the United States. The top image here, you have the CNN correspondent, the White House correspondent, and that's their live shot. In the background, what do you have? The White House. In the image at the bottom, you've got Paula Hancock. She's the CNN correspondent in South Korea. In the background, you have Cheongbokgung Palace and a construction site and a traffic jam. It doesn't offer near the same political communication. In the top image, which every international broadcaster can obtain, you have the White House empowering the office of the American president. In the bottom image, you don't. Why don't you? David Hawley, the producer and chief cameraman of CNN, spent months looking for that live shot. He wanted, I'm sure, the Blue House in the background. But a foreign correspondent or multimedia journalist like myself can't get near the Blue House. Couldn't when it was the presidential office. You would get intercepted by security that would want to stop you because it's a national security issue. Political communication is a national security issue, much stronger and much more important than interdicting journalists or preventing them from using and empowering the office of leaders around the world. And that's understood by Americans, but unfortunately not yet understood here in South Korea. I myself have been intercepted many times and prevented from taking a live shot from the Blue House. There's been a little bit of progress there. You can get to the fountain, but you can't put the Blue House in the background. Now the president's moved to a building that is kind of unrecognizable. And actually, in terms of the public, you can't really, in terms of the media, you can't really get to it to do a live shot. It would take too long. So perhaps at some future time, the government will decide to, place some potential live shot or a media complex of some type in front of his office, rather than having people getting live shots at the War Memorial with the demonstration in the background. I don't know that the government would want that all the time. Let's move on. So South Korea's Indo-Pacific strategy, as was mentioned earlier, it was really kind of predictable. We saw this coming when Yoon Suk-yeol was elected. We knew that South Korea was going to make this shift from the east to the west, so to speak, and have a stronger alliance with the United States. He telegraphed that a little bit, as was mentioned at the ASEAN ROK summit, and then it was announced in December of 2022 by Kim Sung-han. Full disclosure here, I participated in a graduate seminar with Kim Sung-han at Korea University, and he very reluctantly signed my thesis on engagement with North Korea of all topics. So let's go on and take a look at the announcement of the Indo-Pacific strategy here.
인태 전략의 3대 비전 중 첫 번째 비전은 자유입니다. 우리 정부는 자유, 민주주의, 법치, 인권을 포함한 보편적 가치를 수호하고 규칙 기반 질서를 강화해 나가고자 합니다. 가치를 공유하는 국가 간 연대에 기초하여
Okay, I don't want to beat up on Kim Sung-han too much. Let's move on and compare him to his counterpart in the United States.
On Wednesday, the focus will be on increasing two-way trade and investment at the U.S.-Africa Business Forum. CEOs and private sector leadership from over 300 American and African companies will convene with the heads of delegation to catalyze investment in critical sectors, including health, infrastructure, energy, agribusiness, and digital.
That's Jake Sullivan. He's arguably the brains behind President Biden's administration and practiced at this. This is a skill, and it takes practice. And he has been chosen as the best of the best at doing this. If you want your foreign policy to be taken seriously, you need the person delivering your foreign policy to be an all-star like him. Let's move on. Back to the Indo-Pacific strategy. What does Yoon want to do with his strategy? One of the primary things is develop a stronger alliance with the United States. And my personal opinion, part of that relationship is a military one. My personal opinion, I'm a liberal. I was perhaps more disposed toward the Moon Jae-in administration than the Yoon Suk-yeol administration. So my position in terms of increasing military cooperation and the large-scale military exercises, which even myself I covered last week up in Pocheon, reflects an over-reliance on military over diplomacy, and I feel promotes a regional arms race that really is something that's been going on perhaps for a couple of decades, but is getting, I believe, more serious. But I can't wear those liberal blinders while I evaluate his policy. The U.S. commitment to South Korea's defense is important. South Koreans' confidence in the U.S. alliance is important. There's baggage here when we think of Dean Acheson placing South Korea outside the sphere of influence prior to the Korean War. Some suggest signaling an invitation for North Korea to invade, and Trump's threat to pull out the troops. These are introducing skepticism, along with the concern that South Koreans have regarding North Korea's nuclear and missile programs, with the majority now in South Korea supporting nuclear weapons. So the perception of the alliance here in South Korea and in terms of South Korea, US, and Japanese adversaries is very important. How is that perception going to change? Now, I want to look at the most powerful political communication recently in terms of US-South Korea relations, and that was the state visit. What I have here is AP Newsroom. This is the platform that broadcasters around the world will choose their clips, choose their footage. The search term that you might be able to see there says Korea. That's from my page of it. But almost every clip that you see there is the summit. Usually I will get a couple of clips a week, at the most one a day, from AP on Korea. For 3 days, it was 6 a day, 12 a day. The state visit was a massive, success, really, for the administration. Broadcasters love this kind of thing. It's got color, it's got emotion, they can plan it, they can schedule it. So really the summit came off, I feel, as a huge success for the administration. And it was capped off in the most, honestly, incredible fashion.
A long, long time ago, I can still remember how that music used to make me smile. And I really felt my chance that I could make those people dance and they'd be happy for a while. February made me shiver with the paper I delivered. Bad news on the doorstep. I couldn't have one more step. I can't remember if I tried when I read about his willow bride. Something touched me deep inside the day the music died.
Okay, that will not be repeated. That's a walk-off home run in Game 7 World Series, okay? Looking at YouTube search of the American Pie, you've got The Telegraph with 500,000 views. Comment, may the US and ROK alliance last forever. We always go together no matter what. God bless America and the ROK. Channel News Asia, Singapore, more than 100,000 views. This is how international relations ought to be conducted. Another comment. Associated Press, 100,000 views. Love USA and Korea, we go together. Up to 500 likes. Now, there were detractors, you know, trolls. Some of these positive comments may be trolls as well, but those negative comments were really, you know, minute comparatively. Now, if you compare this to, say, Psy, that's not that many views. Psy got something like 1 billion views for Gangnam Style or something like that. The reason that there weren't even more views than this is because everybody had already seen it on TV. CBS, NBC, ABC, CNN, Fox, Times, Forbes, Reuters. Everybody carried it. They got it from the clip that I showed you earlier from AP Newsroom. This kind of thing is not going to happen again, and marks an extraordinary success of, again, the state visit and taking a larger perspective of it, in effect, the Indo-Pacific strategy. So in conclusion, what's important that we found out of that state visit was that Americans' recognition of South Korea is going to be affected by that. Probably 1 billion people around the world saw that. Americans saw that. It'll be a little thing that they remember 10 years from now. That's more powerful than an Ohio-class submarine. Adversaries are going to recognize that. They're going to see, okay, look, China and North Korea are going to see that. They've seen that, certainly. And they're going to think, well, placing a wedge between the US and South Korea isn't going to work. Look at them. You couldn't have scripted all of that better, the song with the person in the audience. Wow. It just doesn't get better than that. However, South Korea does need better political communications if it wants its foreign policy to really be recognized on the international stage, wants to become that pivotal state that you mentioned. We are in a new era of interdependence now. And part of that is brought about by the rise of China. Part of that is by the Ukraine war, in which we are facing greater, sort of stronger and sharper allegiances and alliances. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I think I was a bit wondering where you were going with this, and I think you finished strong. And I also think your presentation evidenced a little bit of the importance of audiovisual cues. Of course, written texts are important, but you know, the sound and the images are also important. And I thank you for your presentation. And we'll have another go round, and I'll start with Mr. Brown. You have mentioned a lot about China, and I know that several European countries have issued their own Indo-Pacific strategy. And from Hiroshima G7 summit, we've noted that several countries were saying that China is not the object of decoupling. It's an object of de-risking, and also the world economy generally needs to diversify. And how do you see this change in tone reflected in the Indo-Pacific strategies from those European countries which have issued those strategies?
Yes, thank you. Well, yes, obviously, as you just pointed out, there's been a shift from what we were hearing, especially during the pandemic, about the need to start decoupling from China in so many ways. And now after the G7 summit in Hiroshima, we were listening a lot to this new concept of de-risking, right? Among the countries or regions that have tried to shift to this new de-risking principle is, for example, the EU, with actually some leaders there within the EU, as we've seen Mr. Emmanuel Macron, for example, trying to set EU's policy a little bit in a bit of a different direction from what was being said for the past 2 years. Of course, I think it's a very good development. The fact that anybody would think that de-risking is the best option, it obviously is, given how actually the fact that so many countries have issued Indo-Pacific strategies means that there's been a shift in the world of what is right now the core region in the world in so many terms, in economical, diplomatic, population-wise. We all know that within the Indo-Pacific region, that's the most populated region in the world, and this is basically the region that is going to determine in so many ways the whole planet's fate for the next century or even more. So obviously the idea of not going for decoupling, for de-risking, just as Korea's own Indo-Pacific strategy. Korea is a country that is a net exporter. It's an exports powerhouse, and 30% of its exports are sold to China. China's Korea's biggest trading partner. There's so many important supply chains that that are linked to China that Korea depends on. We're talking, for example, rare earths. Those are vital for so many things. It would be it definitely wouldn't be a good idea, certainly, to pull the plug. And as you've Ms. An, as you actually said, this relationship also goes back to 5,000 years. It's not like you can suddenly tell your neighbor that you're not going to, talk to him anymore. So obviously, I think things are taking a turn for the good in that sense. At least when it comes, for example, for the Taiwan Strait and the importance of maintaining stability in that area in the South China Sea. Korea itself depends on those routes so much, for example. And it's not only Korea, Japan too, net importers of commodities, oil and natural gas. Literally go through that tiny alley there, Taiwan Strait, South China Sea, the Malacca Strait. Peace and stability are a must for so many countries in the Indo-Pacific region, and as we've seen after what happened with supply chain disruptions during the pandemic, the whole globe basically depends on the stability of that region. Added also the fact that Taiwan with Korea is basically the most important hub when it comes to semiconductors right now. Such an important product right now these days for the whole world. So.
Thank you very much. 그다음 제가 질문을 드리겠습니다. 일본도 인도 태평양 전략을 내놨는데요. 일본의 전략 같은 경우에는 가장 중요한 엘리먼트가 뭐라고 일본에서는 평가하고 계신지, 그리고 한국의 인태 전략과 함께 연계해서 함께 이행될 그런 소지가 있다고 평가하시는지. 네,
네, 기본적으로 똑같아요. 뭐 우리 일본도 한국도 미국 동맹 국가니까. 그러니까 우리가 함께 가는 길이 똑같아요. 근데 제가 가장 주목하는 것은 어떤 것을 일본과 한국과 어떤 분야에서 협력을 하면서 자유, 민주주의 있는 인도 태평양 지역을 만들 수 있겠는지, 그것에 대해서 주목하고 있습니다. 특히 우리 사실은 일본도 한국도 많이 문제를 공유하고 있습니다요. 물론 저출산뿐만 아니라 많이 있어서, 그리고 일본 입장에서 보면 지금 한국에서 많이 배워야 하는 것도 있습니다요. 특히 저 한국에 온 지 2년 지냈는데 현금 쓰는 기회가 현금 많이 쓰는 기회가 없어서 그런 시스템을 요즘 일본도 많이 배워야 합니다. 네, 그런 거 서로 배워야 하는 것을 다른 나라에서도 소개하면서 가장 좋은 자유 있는 인도 태평양 지역을 만들 수 있겠으면 좋겠다고 저 그렇게 생각합니다. 네.
감사합니다. 그다음 다음 next speaker. I see that you are very much interested in the ROK-US alliance. Actually, the ROK-US alliance is called the linchpin for the regional peace and prosperity. And this year, ROK and the US have celebrated the 70th anniversary of the alliance. And I know you are a Canadian, but still you are from North American continent, so you are qualified to speak on this issue. So from a journalist perspective, who's been in Korea for a long time, what do you foresee lies for the ROK-US alliance for the another 70-year relationship?
Well, I think probably we're going to see a continued strong alliance between South Korea and the United States. It'll have, I guess, small ebbs and flows depending on the orientation, especially of the South Korean government. And I think it's less of a hostage to politics than perhaps domestic policy and most other policies of the administration. So I see the alliance probably carrying on. And you know, the term that you didn't use, I thought you were going to say ironclad. That's the term that I think that we hear oh so often from American officials that come to the region. But I don't see that changing too much unless there is a change in the orientation of the governments in China and in North Korea. And I think that's maybe a long-term shift that we shouldn't expect to see it, certainly in the near or even mid-future. So I certainly expect the U.S.-South Korea alliance to remain. It's my hope that some of the activities of the alliance could be toned down. It could be just a more effective military alliance without adding on what I argue is the military exercises that are broadcast to the international community. That's really strong, assertive and aggressive, I feel, political communication that's unnecessary. The militaries can work together and do work together and conduct training activities that don't involve massive drills observed and shot by legions of the foreign media and other observers. So while the alliance I expect to remain strong, I'm hope that it can take a front and center position in terms of South Korea's foreign policy and relations within the region.
Thank you. And another expression comes to mind, no daylight between. Remember that expression? Of course, ironclad is always the most obvious and the very important description when it comes to the ROK-US alliance. And at this point, has anybody spoken not enough what's on his mind? Would you like to? Or should we take a question from the floor if anybody wants to ask a question? If I don't see, oh, yes, please, the lady. You have the floor.
Hi. Thank you for your...
So who are you directing your question to?
It's an open question. My name is Linda. I work for the UN DPPA. I was just wondering if you had any views on the ROK potentially joining Quad, for instance, and like in the Indo-Pacific strategy, relations with like India and potential for like expanded cooperation with India?
Do you want to go ahead?
I think that's one of those ebbs and flows that is maybe at a higher potential with the Yoon Suk-yeol administration. I think he has voiced some approval and some desire to join the Quad. So I would say if you are in favor of that, that now would be a good time to try to push for that. Under another administration, they might be a little bit more sensitive to, especially how China would feel about this. And I think, joining the Quad would be an example of what we might look between the lines in terms of the text that we have of the Indo-Pacific strategy, how it does have elements that would suggest that South Korea is a little bit wary of China. If we looked at the countries that were named in the document, it started with North Korea to say that we need to address North Korea's nuclear and missile programs, and then the United States, strengthen the alliance, Japan, trilateral alliance, and better relations, and then allusions to China and the ideals of freedom and democracy and human rights, freedom of navigation, no change of status without negotiations, and these types of things that I think are kind of directed toward China, and I think probably recognized by China as something that we expected with the Yoon Suk-yeol administration. So in terms of potentially joining the Quad, now would be the time. I don't know that it's that necessary for South Korea to do that, but it might serve the interests of the Indo-Pacific strategy to broaden things beyond the trilateral alliance that especially some South Koreans find a little bit offensive, considering the baggage between South Korea and Japan. So if that was broadened in a way, it might be more palatable to the South Korean public.
Yes, regarding Quad, the current status is that Korea will contribute to working groups of Quad in the areas of such as climate change or health issues. So I think Korea is open to working in terms of working groups, and I think that Quad is an evolving organism actually. So we'll see how Quad develops within the region in terms of substance. And thank you for your question. And does anybody have a question, or should I pose a question to you? Or would you like to add to this?
Well, regarding your question, thank you so much. I think regarding Quad, on the one side, of course, President Yoon has expressed his interest in working together with the Quad group, but we also must remember that Quad was born as a sort of mechanism to keep an eye on China. This was back in 2007 when China was very different back then, and we were already talking about military rise and increase in military spending, but things were very different, and now Quad has been revived. And just how President Yoon has actually showed interest also in working with NATO. For the first time, Korea opened a diplomatic mission to NATO in Brussels. But joining Quad, I think, would be probably a very bold decision as of now, because of Quad being such a mechanism designed to keep an eye on China. It doesn't probably send the right message as of now, but as I said, in the mid to long term, probably it's going to depend on China's actions whether the ROK in the future or not would join Quad. And regarding India, I think India is obviously a powerhouse in the region, a very interesting country in both diplomatically, strategically, economically. But on the other hand, I think the Indo-Pacific strategy is a very important first step on, as you put it, Ms. Han, this is a bit like, coming out of the cocoon. Korea has been very focused on the very complex situation in the Korean peninsula for so long. I used to talk to diplomats back in the day, and they would complain kind of like, you know, it's so difficult to work in Korea sometimes because Koreans place so many resources on everything that goes around the peninsula, be it the alliance with the U.S. or the strained relationships or backs and forths with Japan or with China, etc. Korea is taking this big step of becoming a true global actor, but also things have to be done at a certain pace, I think. And for example, as I mentioned, ASEAN is in this case a very important area for Korea to increase its presence. It's already the region where I believe almost 2/3 of Korean investment lie within South Asia, and that I think is the priority right now. And maybe in the future we'll see an increase in Korea-India ties, and that would definitely be very interesting.
그리고 일본도 쿼드의 멤버이죠. 쿼드의 멤버. 예. 근데 쿼드에 대해서 제가 계속 얘기를 하고 싶은 건 아닌데 이와 관련해서 혹시 뭐 말씀하실 게 있으면 예.
Wasn't it Japan that initiated the Quad? Yeah, isn't that right?
네, 제가 옛날에 비엔나에서 독후방 했을 때는 일본 작게 보였습니다요. 하지만 이번에 한국에서 일본을 보면 크게 보입니다요. 그러니까 지금 쿼드가 많이 중요하다는 거 잘 이해할 수 있지만 먼저 지금은 한일 관계 자유, 민주주의 가치관을 공유하는 한일 관계를 옛날처럼 100%까지 회복하는 것가 가장 중요하다고. 쿼드도 중요합니다만 먼저 한일 관계가 중요하다고. 저 그렇게 생각합니다.
네. 인태 지역에 있어서 가장 가까운 나라인 그런 일본과의 관계 개선이 매우 중요하다고 저도 동의를 합니다. 네, 저희에게 주어진 세션의 시간이 10분 정도 남았는데 더 질문이 있으신가요? 그렇지 않다면 저희가 제가 이제 마지막 인사말을 하고 이 세션을 종료하는 것이 좋을 것 같습니다. 왜냐하면 다음번 지금 저 외교부에서 주관하는 만찬이 있는데 거기에 참석을 하셔야 할 것 같아서요. 그래서 오늘 사실 I thank you very much. I think I feel like I had a peek inside view of a very vibrant journalistic discussions and. Of course, those were your personal views, but you were very forthright and you were very frank in your appraisals of the situation, and also you gave a lot of interesting tidbits. And I really think that it's worth listening to those journalists because it's always the journalists who ask questions of government bureaucrats, but I get to ask questions of you, and I really enjoyed this session, and I thank you for participating with a very sincere attitude and being very fruitful and constructive and productive. I really say this with sincerity, and I would like to invite the audience members to give a warm round of applause to our speakers here. Thank you very much. So let me conclude this session with this, and I think tomorrow we have many interesting sessions, and please keep tuned and watch those sessions. Thank you very much.